Okay. All right. So, how are you today? And tell a little bit about yourself and all that.
Uh, I'm doing good, thank you. I'm Officer Jeremy Bohannon with the Austin Police Department. I've been a police officer for 12 years. I do a lot of community policing stuff, a lot of youth engagement, go to schools, pretty much do it all. But yeah, that's about it.
Yeah. So actually, guys, we met. We like did a whole interview before, but then the sound wasn't working. So this is our second attempt at
Yeah,
interview. So the questions are gonna be similar, but you're gonna see a little bit of different stuff, just due to things that have happened since we last
yeah.
talked.
No,
Um,
definitely.
so the first thing that I think I want to start off with is the stuff we already sort of talked about. And so, what is that dynamic like as being a black man and being a police officer? Um, sort of based off what we talked about before.
Yeah, shoot, I don't even remember what we talked about, but it ain't changed. So, it's a struggle. I think one of the biggest things, like when I first went out and started, kind of trying to talk to people and figure out, what, people want to see from their police department. I was getting a lot of, hey, you're a traitor, take your badge off, you're part of an unjust system. And so, and I've always known that. And so, what I've been trying to do, and especially with this situation with everything going on right now, is just start trying to gain more information based off of people's experiences. So, and what I've noticed is that, you know, um, being a black police officer really puts you like right smack in the middle of everything. Or I'm not going to say just because I'm black, but just because I understand what it's like to be black in America and I understand why people are out in the streets right now. It kind of just puts me in the middle. And so I've kind of taken it upon myself to try to bring people to a little better understanding. So then it's not so like adversarial and there's just a lot of misconceptions out there. And so as soon as you can start bringing people in the middle, start having dialogue and conversation and start, realizing that both sides really kind of wants the same thing, then we start getting some real solutions.
Do you ever feel like you're going to have to choose at some point between, well, you can't really choose between being a black man, but will you have to choose between like not being a police officer anymore or continuing to be a police officer?
I hope not. Like that's what I'm working for right now. I know what being a police officer, when you do it the right way, and what most of the officers that I know try to do, when it's done the right way, like you know, we do a lot of good things in the community, a lot of great things. I've helped deliver a baby. I've given CPR to people. I've given people rides to get medicine. I've done a lot of things where I've been able to connect people with resources, be able to connect, businesses with people that need things. So you're afforded that opportunity as a police officer because, when there's problems, people run to you. So my hope is that, I won't ever have to be in that situation where I'll have to choose between being a cop or not. Obviously, I'll never have to choose. I'm always going to be black, no matter what. And so I just use the information that I know, the experiences that I've had, my friends' experiences, my family, my parents, my grandparents, all their experiences to kind of help the police department and police officers kind of gain better understanding, so that we don't have to go down that road of being disbanded and abolished, and have to like start all over.
Right. So, what is it like when a black man or, well, particularly black people, when they're killed, like in the precinct, what is that environment like between you and other police officers?
Uh, you know, um, Anytime it happens, it's a sad situation. Like you never want people to die. You know what I mean? And when you look at it, and I always tell people to look locally, look at what's happening within their own department. Check the local trends that you have because we always want to take the entire country and put that on each individual person or each individual department. But when it does happen, like we all have the same questions that everybody else does. And I think the biggest misconception is that, if it happens within my department and I'm not there, then I'm hiding information or I'm not telling people, like I'm not telling people anything about it, but in reality, we had a shooting this year in our city. I don't even know who the officer is. I may have met him before, but I can't picture his face. But I have no information about it. They don't, like, the information doesn't flow throughout the police department that way. I know exactly what the public knows, and that's a cell phone video or whatever the news reported. Because when those things happen, the officers that are involved, they get put on a do not discuss order. They get investigated, and the investigation is kind of sealed up to where I couldn't even go into the computer and look it up. And so until all the facts get put out by the public later. So that's a huge misconception, and it sucks because I know a lot of people in my community, and it's hard when they're asking me, hey, what about this, what about that? And like, I just don't have all the facts to, when people think I have the facts. So it just makes it look like I'm lying or trying to cover things up. So in a nutshell, it's really, really tough.
So do you keep your fellow police officers accountable whenever you hear anything racist amongst you guys in the precinct?
Oh, definitely. Even right now, we've been with all our dialogue and everything. I've personally, as a police officer in uniform, with a fellow officer, I can personally say I've heard two things. And both, one time I reported it, and the other time I was able to talk to the person, and it was more of an ignorance thing than like a egregious, type of thing. It's like sometimes people just don't really understand. There's a lot of talk, and I think that's why there's so much divide in the country right now. Right now there's a lot of talk about the statistics and crime and being able to make it out. And I had somebody tell me, just the fact that I'm sitting in a police car with you, and we're riding together and we're doing all this stuff together should show you that there's no racism in the world, and that everybody has the same shake. And after talking, and we talked pretty much the entire night, he was able to understand like where I was coming from when I was telling him, hey, that's wrong, dude. That's the wrong mentality. And that's not what, just because you don't have these experiences doesn't mean that they don't happen. And I think that's the biggest problem right now, is that there's a lot of people that don't have the experiences and understand as police officers. And then as the community, there's a lot of people that don't have the experience of being a police officer and seeing what happens on a daily basis to really understand what it's like to be a police officer. So I think when people start to think of it that way, on both sides, and start trying to gain more understanding of what it's like, and how it feels to be both, or walk in each other's shoes, or have a little bit of empathy for both sides, then we can start getting to like some real solutions and start making the world a better place.
So recently a police chief of, I'm not sure where he was the police chief of, but the two officers who killed Rashad,
Mm-hmm.
the police chief, it was a black police chief, he was saying that that was justified based off what you know about that, based off whatever the public says or whatever. What do you think that shooting was justified, or do you think it could have went a different way?
So I'm glad you asked it. I've had a lot of debates with a lot of different people about this, even officers. And this is something that's going to have to be more of the conversation going forward on what people expect out of their police department. I made a public post basically kind of outlining, because I watched, most of the video. And I watched pretty much beginning until arrest. And, that beginning part was super professional. The officers did everything they could as far as the DWI investigation and all that, which they had the right to be there. They had the right to make the arrest. Like, all of that was pretty much legit. From what I saw, I was looking for signs of racism. I was looking for signs of bias in what they were doing, and I just didn't see any of it. And when that arrest was trying to be made, I made a comment saying that we didn't use the officers didn't use the taught arrest tactics. Now, the way we're taught to arrest people in different departments, in mine, you tell somebody, hey, you're under arrest, turn around, spread your legs, lean forward, put your hands behind your back, and then you go in and gain control and put handcuffs on them. Now, that is the safest way to put handcuffs, to where if somebody wanted to run or if somebody wanted to fight back, it would be hard for them to do that, because they would have to do a few things to get an advantage back, right? But we don't do it because, people, like, just imagine if there's people out there and they're watching and you're giving them all these commands to do this and look silly, you know what I mean? It's like bad optics. And so I think a lot of officers are trying to get away from the things that, look bad, you know, that's like, I don't want to like make you feel degraded or make you feel like I'm like asserting all this power over you. So I'm just going to come in and just like put you in handcuffs and just tell you, hey, you're under arrest, you know, and it's real smooth and simple, and all officers do it. However, since it's not the way that we're trained, that led to the fight, right? And then they were fighting for a long time, and the taser gets taken. When the taser gets taken, during the fight, they're trying to get him under arrest. When the taser gets taken, now that's a different story. In Texas, and I don't know how it is in Georgia, in Texas, if somebody takes your weapon, now that's a felony. On top of, he had his DWI, and I'm not condoning or I'm not blaming anybody. I'm just trying to give like an overview of my thoughts on it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so when he takes that taser, and yeah, he's running away, and the big debate is, hey, why don't you just let him go? And I think the chase would have continued on until he points the taser back. I know I've been tased twice. I know that if I'm in a situation where I might get tased by somebody with the prongs, now I'm in a huge disadvantage. And if somebody did want to hurt me, they would be able to do it without question if those prongs connected anywhere on my body. And so me having a taser pointed at me, I can't say that I wouldn't have done what those officers had done. And I also can't say that I would have, because I wasn't in their shoes and I didn't see what they saw or experience any of that. As well as, the trauma and the heightened sense of, adrenaline and all that stuff going on. So I would say, when they say intent, like they intentionally murdered this man, like I don't see that, because if they were intentionally trying to do it, they would have done it at the very beginning when they were fighting. They would have done it before when they were doing the DWI arrest. And so although, I make sure everybody's clear with where I stand, I don't think that he deserved to die. My hope was that he would have just gotten arrested and gone and taken his DWI and went to jail, and then, been able to sober up and then wake up the next day. But, it's an unfortunate thing. And I think the political climate that we're in right now, it's like those types of things are going to get vilified no matter what. And so that's why a lot of officers are stepping back like, hey, I'm not going to do my job. It makes it hard because, we're so reactive to what other people do, and not, we don't just do things just because, and so they reacted to what was happening. And unfortunately, he put his life in those officers' hands. And that's the sad part about it.
Yeah. Okay. So then next question. So what do you think about this idea of cancel culture? So cancel culture is like this thing where every time someone makes a mistake or makes a, racist remark or something of that nature, people automatically want to cancel them or cancel everything they've done or anything like that. Do you think that's an appropriate way to move forward by doing cancel culture, or should we not cancel them and kind of teach them and try to show them or try to explain to them why what they did is wrong so they have a chance to get back up, if that makes sense?
No, that makes a lot of sense, and I'm glad you kind of put it that way, because yeah, I agree. Like I am of the notion that dialogue and communication kind of helps create change. And if you just cut people off or just like cancel, like if a business does something or whatever it is, and you just cancel, now all you're doing when you do that is you're alienating and like continuing the divide, right? And so if the ultimate goal is for togetherness, for unity, for anti-racism or anti-discrimination or anti-anything, if that's the goal, you have to start coming together and start having dialogue and letting people know the why. Like why do you feel like this is racist or discrimination or discriminatory, or you got to start to understand, because a lot of times when we cancel like a huge department or a huge company or it's usually like one person doing something, and it's not like the an organizational type of thing, and so like you look at Starbucks, it's like one person. And Starbucks, they've had it rough. They did some things to officers at one point, and then they went and did some things to Black people at one point, and then they, it's like you don't know where they stand, and it's just kind of individuals within that are doing certain things. And so having that dialogue and having and helping train or like get people to understand your side and why this makes you upset is the biggest thing. And that's what I've been doing with the police department. I'm trying to get officers to kind of understand why, like, people, like, why somebody would call you a racist and they don't know you. You know what I mean? And that's really important for people to understand, that it's not them personally, it's what their uniform has represent for a long time, dating back hundreds of years. And so once they start to understand that, then they can understand, okay, hey, maybe I shouldn't be taking this stuff so personal. Now let me try to talk and try to see, like, what are some things that I can do different, or I can do better, or I can spread throughout and share with other people. So I think the dialogue is very important. And it's like having a good dialogue to where it's not, you're pointing fingers or blaming, because there's a lot of people that are on both sides that just don't really understand. And so when you blame them and blame them for not understanding, then they're going to shut off. But if you can understand why they don't understand their experiences, then you can kind of help them gain a better understanding.
So, do you think that Donald Trump has empowered police officers, like just around the country, to be more aggressive, especially whenever he put in his martial law to like have army on the streets and stuff like that?
I'm not political, and I don't call anybody out, especially publicly. But I will say that it doesn't help. It doesn't help anything. Um, me personally, I have not seen any directives or anything that's saying, hey, from the president, he wants you to do this or that, but I can see where people will take his words and like internalize, like, oh, this is what I got to do, and this is how I need to help my country, and so, yeah, I'll say he doesn't do a great job of bringing people together and like a unity and like, unifying the country. And so, if I had to say that he's empowering and getting people riled up to be able to do things like that, I would say that it shows that it's possible. If somebody is die hard, I'm following anything you say, then yeah, it would happen. But there's a lot of people that don't internalize some of the things that he says, and so that gives me optimism that that's not happening nationwide.
Yeah. So you've been at these protests. You done any security at these protests?
Yeah, I've done both. I've done, we call it mobile field force. So we're out there just kind of protecting and helping people. And then I've also been out there without my uniform on, just t-shirt that, like police, not undercover or anything, just going out to talk to people. And I've done it in uniform too. I actually was able to get our department to create teams of officers in uniform to go out into the protest and start talking to people and start, finding out solutions or things that they want to see within their police department. Call it like a community engagement team. But yeah, we've been out there every day, pretty much, talking and trying to gain understanding, helping other officers gain understanding, helping the community gain understanding. So I wasn't out there when like it was really super crazy. I was guarding some other spots, but yeah, I've been out there.
So, have you ever found yourself, like I was talking to he's not a police officer, but like he works in the government for like federal government protection. And he says that a lot of times he'll go into the actual protest as just like a regular person to kind of be there as a defense, just in case a police officer does want to do something or make a situation more aggressive. Have you done that as a police officer, where you're just out there like regular, like no shirt on, like no police shirt on, and like just protesting as a way to kind of protect from other officers or anything like that?
Well, I haven't done it as that. One of my main reasons for going out the first time was really because I understand and know that when, you have people that are upset and protesting, they want to just talk, you know what I mean? Like a lot of people just want to be heard. And so I know that when there's dialogue happening, and not just one dialogue, but a bunch of dialogues within a protest, and our protests weren't huge. When the more dialogue there is, the less chances for it to be, where there's situations where officers have to act and have to go in and do stuff, or people are throwing things or whatever. So that's my biggest thing was, look, like if we can have officers out there talking and out there having dialogue with people and moving it around, a lot of people are focused on those dialogues because they want to hear what officers have to say about what's going on in the country. And so that's kind of been my my biggest thing is like, hey, do we just get out there and talk, you know? And yeah, I'm looking for, you know, for officers that aren't doing the right thing. But usually whenever we've been out there just talking, everybody's really relaxed. You know, like the officers take their riot gear off, they drop their batons. You know, there's not a huge show of force with, you know, lines and everything like that. It's like everybody's just a little bit more chill, and you know, there's people talking, you know, and so it's helped a lot in a lot of these protests that we've had here.
So within the Black community right now, there's also the shift to like focus on Black women and Black trans people who are not being represented well in this movement entirely. And there's also like this feeling as if like even if all the white supremacists were to disappear, Black women and Black trans people would be still in fear of their life on occasion. So do you have anything to say about that as a Black male?
Yeah, you know, I feel like with our community right now, that's been a big thing that we, you know, we've actually talked about. You know, we make sure that we're super inclusive, especially in our conversations. I mean, you know, we have trans people in our police department, we have Black women in our police department, and obviously the same in the community. And so they've been at the table, like when we're talking, you know, that's who we're talking to. One of the people that I work with the most. He's the president of our LGBTQ Officers Association. You know, and he's been working with me as we've been trying to figure out solutions and different things, and making sure that we're not missing any of the marginalized communities, you know, that we have in our community. So when we're talking about reform, and we're talking about you know, things that we could do in the department, ways that we can train officers, you know, everybody's included in that. And actually, I helped come up with an idea for a training on the history of policing, but it covers, you know, women, it covers LGBTQ communities, Asian communities. So it's inclusive. It's not just a Black male thing; it's a everybody thing. And at the end of this, we just want to make sure that everybody has an equal say, and everybody feels like, you know, they're represented at the table and when decisions are being made.
So do you believe in defunding the police as a police officer?
You know, I believe in some forms, not the way that it's currently happening in some cities, including mine, where they're just, hey, we're going to take a chunk out. We don't know what we're going to do with it yet, and then we're going to take away 100, 200 officers, you know, and, you know, I understand the logic behind it. You know, you want to be able to support, you know, underserved communities, and, you know, you want to be able to do all that, but there's got to be a better plan. You know, our city just kind of did a knee jerk. Hey, we're going to vote to take. We have a $400 million budget in our department, which is pretty small for a lot of big cities. But they decided, hey, we're going to take 125 million, and then we're going to cancel your next academy and cancel all of your officers. And so now you were just kind of just taken away. And so my whole thing with that is, you know, number one, you're sending a message that, hey, the police department is just bad. You know what I mean? Like everybody within the department's bad. And then you're also sending a message, hey, although I know you guys have been short for a long time by 200 officers, we're going to take more officers away, but then we're going to ask you to do more and ask you to continue to do all the things that you were doing while you were short. And what that does is that lowers morale for officers who are actually doing a good job and doing great things and helping people every single day. And so you don't want a police department with a low morale out there already upset at what's going on and being, you know, vilified by everybody. Now you're asking those same officers who you basically stripped a lot of things away from to go out and do better, you know what I mean, and do a better job, you know. And that's hard to do. Like there's some of us that are like, hey, I know that I have to do a better job, so I'm going to do it. But there's a lot of us that, you know, like you look at Atlanta, you know, they're you know, you got officers just leaving, you know, and you don't want that. You want officers that want to be there, but that want to help the community and want to be a part of the solution, but not kind of stripped away from, you know, having everything stripped away right away without any plans on how we're going to move forward. But all that to say, I do agree with some forms of defunding and helping out with some of the issues in the community. However, money, and we've already seen this, money doesn't solve racism. Money doesn't solve discrimination. Money doesn't solve, you know, mortgage loan practices and bad education systems and all that stuff. Like those are laws, those are deep-rooted things that need to be taken care of as well. And it's also not going to solve, police brutality. If anything, if you get an officer with low morale that's already pissed off at the community because they feel like they're against us, that officer may end up doing something that we don't want to see.
So, so you believe that we do need police, like police are necessary.
Oh yeah, I do. And honestly, I'll say this. I'll say right now, like let's say you take away police right now, there's still going to be crime. There's still going to be murders. There's still going to be burglaries. There's still going to be sexual assaults. There's still going to be, there's still going to be a lot of things that we already deal with, right? Like those things aren't just going to just go away. But I do feel like with systemic changes, and once you start once you start bringing more resources to communities that are underserved, start changing some of the old practices and old laws from the past that were written at a time when there was deep-rooted racism, start changing a lot of that stuff. Now, as we're progressing throughout life and we're progressing and things are getting better for everybody and they're seeing the change, kids aren't going to gangs for stuff. Parents are getting paid a little bit more, so now they're home. They don't need 2 or 3 jobs. Now they can take care of helping their kids with school and all this. Like all of these things kind of add up. Once you start getting things back to the way that they're supposed to be and equal for everybody, then you can start pulling back on your policing and start pulling back on, okay, hey, crime rates are going down. Let's pull back. And like Camden, New Jersey is a good example. Although they got rid of their small department that they had, I think they had 200 officers. They got rid of their department, but they kept policing. What they did was they just had the county come, and so they were still taking calls. They were still out there. They didn't just completely just get rid of police and then everything got better. But what they did was they got rid of their 200, and then they just rebuilt the culture of what they were doing, and they raised it back up to 400 or 500. So now they have a whole bunch of police out there, but they're doing a lot more community policing. Their culture is a little bit better. And so something like that would be a great idea, especially when you have a good department that's already done a lot of great things. And all it is trying to help change that culture and get people to understand, hey, we need to have a culture change within our police department. If we can do that, now we can turn things around. And now it'll be a form of depolicing because now the police are more of a liaison to the community rather than an enforcer.
So you already kind of touched on this, but what suggestions have you got for changes, and what do you believe that you need to see change in the policing system?
I've kind of created something, and then I've sent it to a couple departments, including my own. Really, empathy. That is the biggest thing. I call it like empathetic policing, where you can, like, just based off of my experiences as an officer and what I've done in the community. If you could get more officers involved in positive interactions within their community that they work in. My biggest thing is, hey, just imagine if an officer, if somebody pulled you over and you knew the officer from a barbecue you were at 2 weeks ago, like how that wouldn't that make you feel just a little bit better? It's like, hey, I know this guy, I've talked to him before. So, he's not going to sit there and mistreat me or do anything bad to me or be afraid of me because we've had a conversation. He coached my kid, or he, did something, we did something fun together and we had a positive encounter. And now the same officer is the one that's pulling me over. Now I still might get a ticket, but at least he's not going to mistreat me. You know what I mean? And so for me, that's how you build that empathy, by infusing your department with community policing activities. And like you're doing more things that are helping the community on a regular, consistent basis all the time, and you're getting all of your officers involved in that. So that way, when they're going on, they know Miss Jenkins, and they know the pastor, and they know the kids that go to the school because they visited all the schools. And so I think that will help build empathy for a lot of officers. I think a lot of officers have it, but there's some that may need, they may need to learn how to be more empathetic and start to understand why their uniform is viewed with fear from the Black community. And so once they have that understanding, once they gain some empathy, they start getting entrenched and infused in their community, and it's the entire department that's doing it. Now you've literally turned your department upside down from being that warrior mentality to the guardian and that servant of your community. And now you can help connect people to resources. I do it all the time. I have a kid, they have some type of problem, runaway, mental health problem, suicidal, whatever, and I help them find resources that are in their area. I'll give rides, we'll do whatever, but I know enough about the community to say, hey, there's a Boys and Girls Club right down the street. You said you like art. They have a great art thing where they go around the city and take pictures, or they paint and do this. You would love it, you know? And then I get people and push them into the different resources that I know of. But just imagine if every officer did the same thing. You know, I just think that would make things a lot better. And it's the solution that does it, that not only is for the community, but it's also for police departments, you know, making the police departments better and more empathetic.
So, do you believe, a lot of people do not believe, especially those who support the Black Lives Matter movement, that there's such thing as a good police officer,
Hmm.
but you do believe in that, and why do you believe in that?
Oh, definitely. You know, I see it. Sorry, I see it all the
Mhm.
time. You know, I'll give you an example. I'll give you an example of one. Um, you know, and I've got a bunch of them. I'll give you an example of one on a call and one just during like a positive interaction that we had. So this happened not too long ago. We got on a call. It was me and a white officer. It was a criminal trespass. The business called us, said, "Hey, there's somebody inside of our business. They're taking stuff. They just picked up the speaker. They saw the camera. They set it down and left." Right. So we ended up finding it. It's a young black male, probably in his early 20s. So the white officer's on the mail, and I'm talking to the business owner, trying to figure out what they want to do now. They want to file charges on him for burglary, which was a felony because it was or it wasn't. I think it was a class A, but it was a really high level charge. And they were like adamant, like, "Hey, we need to file charges on this guy. Like, this is the third time he's come in here, blah blah blah." And they're just, so I let the other officer know what they wanted to do. And sometimes when the owner wants to do something, we kind of have to go with the community. And so I talked to the officer, and he's like, "Man, like, I don't want to ruin this kid's life." This is a white officer, and I agreed with him. But I wanted to see what his reaction was, and he just like, "I don't want to ruin this kid's life." Like he didn't hurt anybody. Let's just try to give him a break. He lied to me at first, but then when I pressed him a little bit, then he told me the truth, told me why he was doing it, and I believe him. And so let's just cut him a break this time. I'll talk to the business owner and try to smooth it over with him, and just kind of give him that like slap on the wrist and let him go instead of ruining his life with a charge, taking him to jail and all that stuff. And that's what we did. But that stuff happens like on a daily basis all over the place. And I'll give you another one. Another two officers that were at a pop-up game. So in the summertime, I'll go and I'll bring 5 to 10 officers with me, and we'll go to the park for free programs with underserved kids in underserved areas, and we'll go and play games. I'll bring food, I'll bring popsicles with water and tattoos. We'll just have a good time. Well, there were some kids playing dodgeball, and one of the kids' shoes were just like completely ripped up. Like they were just really bad. And so the officers came up to me and said, "Hey, is it okay if we buy this kid some shoes?" They buy him some shoes, 2 pairs of brand new shoes, socks, and everything. And then we brought him some clothes later on to his family. So like there's a lot of good people that are doing the work, and for those people that are doing great things in the community, they feel like, hey, we don't do it for recognition, but when it's time to where it's like, hey guys, like we're out here, there's good cops out here, but when nobody believes us, that's why you see a lot of people trying to post more things, more positive things, because if you don't see it, you don't believe it. And it's the same thing when officers are talking about racism. If you don't see it, you don't believe it. Same thing in community. If you don't see good community policing or good things happening in the community, or when officers are given breaks, then you're not going to believe it. And so that's why I talk about bringing people in the middle. And so, the officers can see all the great work that Black Lives Matter is doing. You know what I mean? Like, but all they don't experience, they don't know what's happening. And all they see is the bad, negative stuff where people are saying kill police officers and, get rid of them. You know what I mean? And we hate cops and this and that. And so that's what a lot of people see. And so that's why there's so much pushback when you're trying to get people to like understand what Black Lives Matter is all about. And then it's the same thing on the other side. So just try to bring everybody in the middle so they kind of understand where all the reasonable people are and the thoughts and all that stuff. And then if we can start changing stuff in here in the middle, then I think it'll start spreading out to the kind of extreme sides. And then we'll get to some resolutions and to a better society.
What would you say to a young Black male right now who's in a position where they don't, like, they are, okay, two scenarios. What would you say to a
Mm-hmm.
young Black male who is, like, really afraid of the police? They don't want anything to do with the police. How would you approach them as a Black male who is a police officer?
I always, every time I talk to kids, black teens, my family members, I always let them know, look, we have to understand that there's disproportionate minority contact right now, right? And that's not just police officers, we see it in society as well. You know, a lot of people, and it's not our fault, it's really not anybody's fault today, it's just kind of a generational thing. A lot of people see us and our skin color as a threat. You know, even as a police officer, I go somewhere and people are like, oh, I want a white officer, you know what I mean? And so like people see the skin color as a threat. And so in order to, you know, to get through your daily, you know, your daily interactions, your daily things, like it's sad that we have to do this right now. And this is what this time is all about, is hoping that in 5, 10, 15 years, we don't have to tell our young Black people that, hey, you have to start thinking about what you're giving off to somebody, like what other people are perceiving of you. Because if they perceive you anything more than just, you know, a regular Joe Schmo, then you're going to be a threat. You know, if you dress a certain way, if you act a certain way, they're going to look at you a little bit different. And just be cognizant. Don't change who you are, but just be cognizant that whatever you put out, it's going to be amplified 10 times because of the color of your skin. And that was something that I had to learn early on in my life as well. That, you know, one of my uncles told me, is like, hey, look, like, I know you like to dress like this, I know you like to do these things. He's like, but just remember, like, you're drawing attention to yourself. You know what I mean? And it happens, and it's sad to say that it's happening today as well. But that's what the Black Lives Matter to me, that's what Black Lives Matter is about to me. It's in 10, 15 years where we don't have to tell our kids, or my 6-year-old son doesn't have to tell his kids, you know, that, hey man, you know, don't wear your hoodie, you know, like, be respectful and don't talk back, and, you know, and try to change the way you're talking to people, because we shouldn't have to be doing that in 2020, but we're still doing it.
Right. And then what would you say to a Black male who right now is in a position where they really do want to become a police officer, but they're getting a lot of scrutiny from outside people,
Yeah.
and people in their own community?
Yeah, I mean, I got it myself when I decided I wanted to do it, from my family, from my friends, community, everybody, you know. And I was just, for some reason, I knew that by doing this, that I was hoping to be the change, and I was hoping to be, you know, the reasonable person in the room, that can help, you know, get other people to, and lead by example, you know what I mean? And so that's what I've been doing. And I feel like this is the opportunity where I've kind of almost groomed myself for the last 10 or 12 years to be in a position that I am right now, to try to help make that change and help bring people together. And so, you know, as a Black person coming to be a police officer right now, it's tough because, you know, you got all these people that are, you know, basically out in the streets because of you, because of what you want to do. And you have to get past that and understand that in order to make change in certain systems, you have to get in it, and you have to at least understand it and be a part of it. So then you know where you can make the most impactful changes, right? Without it basically, you know, leaving people vulnerable, or you know, allowing disorder in the streets. So there's a lot of things that police departments, police officers can do. But then I take it a step further, and I say, hey, as a police officer, if I can get my department to start to understand that there's a lot of systemic things that need to change, now we can help be a part of those systemic changes that need to happen in the criminal justice system, in education, in housing, in mortgage loan, you know, all this stuff. Like, we can start being a part of that change, because right now it's Black versus blue, and it really shouldn't be. You know, the people who make all those rules are sitting up and watching everything that's happening, and probably laughing and smiling right now because they don't have any heat on them.
Right. So, okay, and then for de-escalating a situation, how would you best say, what would you say to someone, both male and female, who feel uncomfortable or scared around a police? What would you do? What would you tell them as far as de-escalating?
You know, if for an individual, as far as de-escalating, really, it's just understanding that I'd say 99% of the time, I don't know the stats, I don't want to throw some stat on there, but I'd say a vast majority of the time, you know, if you're stopped or pulled over, there's at least some reason, right? In today's day and age, with cameras and everything else, it would be really hard for an officer to get away with just a straight up stop for no reason at all. You know what I mean? And so, you know, just get through that. Try to do your best to get through that altercation or that interaction, you know, respectfully. It's hard to say, and you don't like to tell people, hey, just comply and you'll be fine, because we've seen where it's not worked out for a lot of people. But on a day-to-day basis, when you look at the numbers, you have a higher likely of getting out of a situation than you are getting hurt in one. And so really it's just about, bringing yourself down to a level to where you just want to get the interaction over with. If you feel like you've been mistreated, don't, don't try to have an argument right there on the street or right there during that time. You wait till it's over, and then you call the department, you call the police oversight, whoever you can complain to, and make a complaint. Because what happens is a lot of people don't complain when they're mistreated, and then 2 or 3 years later they talk about how they were mistreated by the police and how this happened, but they didn't make a complaint. And so now nobody's going and looking and checking and be like, hey, like, did this really happen? What really happened? So I always tell people to complain every single time you think you're being mistreated. Even if you're like, oh, it's borderline, just complain, because what if this person does it all the time? So once you complain, then they can look at it as a broader lens, and then maybe we can start getting these bad officers who are making everybody else look bad off the streets.
So what would you do? Like, say you're in a position, what is something that you're allowed to like record situations whenever you get pulled over or anything like that?
Yes.
But like, would you also ask for like like some people, they go into these interactions, but they're in shock, so they don't really ask, the officer's name or anything like that. Are you allowed to do that as a
yeah you are, and you should, and just ask for the name and the badge number, and I know in Texas, like, we're supposed to make it clear or make it known that, hey, this is my name, badge number. Like, we're not allowed to hide it. We're not allowed to like block people from recording or taking pictures or anything like that. So and even if you don't get a name or you don't get a badge number, you have a stop, so you know what time you got stopped and where. And so all that stuff should be recorded, right? Like the officer, wherever, most police cars have GPS in it, cameras, you got body camera. They probably making a call to dispatch, so all that stuff is saved. So if you say, hey, I got stopped on June 17th at 5 p.m. on this street, like 99.999% of the times, like, they'll be able to find that call. So if you don't get the name, you don't get a number or anything like that, it's okay. Just remember where and when you were stopped. And then you can call in and be like, hey, I was stopped at this time. This is my name. This is my car. And they'll be able to pull it up and find it.
Okay. So, all right. We're almost done. But what is your biggest fear as being a Black man and being a police officer for you, your family, and your kids? So I guess.
Right now, man, my biggest fear is that, my biggest fear right now is that we have people on the extremes of both sides of what's happening right now. And my biggest fear is that it might lead to like, some type of civil war or something, you know what I mean? And that's scary to me, I want this world to be a better place, but I don't think it's, I think there's a lot of people that are derailing a lot of things right now, people that don't want change, that people just don't really care. And those are the people that are going to make matters worse for everybody who just legitimately wants to be equal and make changes, and so I say that's probably my biggest fear all the way down, as an officer, as a Black man, as a parent, as a husband, is that people just are so afraid of change and so set in their ways that we can't come to any type of solutions to make things better. And then somebody who has a lot of power in this country might say, hey, forget it, let's just do this then. And so that's what I'm afraid of, and that's why I've been working so hard to get my department and the people that I know at least to start having dialogue and start talking, so that we can start gaining some understanding, so that hopefully we can kind of affect some changes.
Okay, and then here I just thought of something. So here's your last question, for real.
No, you're fine.
So what do you think is the best way to get white supremacists out of these high positions that they hold in like policing, but really in government in general, other than voting, which a lot of people do not do, but other than that, what do you think is the best way to try to?
Yeah, I mean, and I think the hardest part with when you talk about white supremacy and racism is it's like an iceberg, you know what I mean? Like, you're not going to see it unless they do something or something actually happens. And so it's a very small piece of it when, you don't see what's underneath. And, you know, when things happen, it's really just kind of just the tip of it. And it's just, you know, a little ripple. So it's hard to say like who is and who's not, because I'm sure there's some on both sides of the aisle when you talk about politics or anything else. And so I think the biggest thing is, and it's sad to say, but the best way is to vote. But when you vote, like, you vet who you're voting for, and it's not just for the president. You know, the people who make all the things go around, especially locally, are your council members, your mayor, your city manager, you know, district attorneys and county attorneys, like the judges and all that. Like, those are the people that are the ones that are given like excessive sentences to people of color, or, you know, choosing who the police chief is, or choosing where the funds go for what, and who they listen to in the community. And so if it's really going to be something that, you know, changes nationwide, it has to be through voting and through people in there who has a record of, you know, doing the right thing for everybody, for the community, and not only for the people who donate to their campaign. So, I mean, voting is important, but I think people need to really understand the citywide stuff, the local, statewide, all of that stuff, because those are the most important times when you really need to get out there and really, you know, find the right candidate that suits everybody and go all in, because that's what everybody else does, and that's what our community doesn't do very well. You know, we don't come together and then come to agreements on somebody and put our money and our political powers together and get our people who are going to be the loud talkers and the people who go and want things to happen. We don't come together and do that. Whereas I know there's families and there's deep rooted people that have done it for years. You know, they get their money together, they get everything together, and they put it all towards one candidate, and that candidate wins because he has all the backing and the money to be able to have a great campaign and look the best.
Right. All right, so we're pretty much done. Do you have any questions for me?
Yeah, and I asked last time. So, what are your thoughts, especially now? I don't know if they've changed by now, but so what are your thoughts on everything, solutions, whatnot? Your thoughts about defunding, abolishing, and all that stuff.
Okay, so as far as defunding, like I said, I don't know exactly how everything works in a police, like being a police officer. I don't know what that's like. I do think that money should go to be taken out of policing, and first go towards education. Money needs to go back into that, and then we also, I think, for as far as community, we do need community policing, and you basically said that. But yeah, I think that's necessary, because I have come to realize that this idea of abolishing all police isn't really realistic, because there's a lot of things that they deal with that we don't even see. So I don't think it's fair to say that every single police should go, but I do think the system itself is like very corrupt and needs to just like fall down, and then we can back up how it's supposed to be. All right, what was your other question?
Oh, well, you actually kind of answered it. You know, just what's your thoughts now? Oh, you know what? Last time we did bring up something, and I wanted to see if you still thought that when you, and I thought it was a good idea. I mean, you know, when you're talking about traffic cops, remember that?
What did I say about traffic
I
cops?
think you're saying that some officers shouldn't have guns.
Oh yes, I forgot to ask you that question about guns. So like I think too, as far as weapons go, yeah, I did ask you, and then you were saying that you do think it is necessary in certain situations.
Mm-hmm.
But I I think as far as guns go, like if you're in a situation where you're dealing with like people on a regular basis, just like you run traffic stops and that type of thing, I don't really think it's necessary for you to have a gun. And I do think that it shouldn't be, if you do have a gun in any situation, it shouldn't be a fatal thing. I know like even like my family too, they believe in packing, like we have guns,
Mm-hmm.
and like even in training they'll tell you like shoot, like you either shoot them dead or you don't shoot them at all, because then you wouldn't have had a reason, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I definitely don't believe in that, and I feel like life is so valuable that if you are going to have a gun, then you don't need to kill people. Like you can shoot them in
Yeah.
their life. And then, but overall, I just don't believe that guns are necessary, especially if you work traffic stops. Like I don't know. Like I
No,
just
I
don't.
get it. I get where you're coming from, and that's oh, sorry again.
No,
I get where you're coming from with that, and I'll offer this, and um, you know, and this is kind of what I talk about when I'm like, there's still a lot of things going on now, and maybe in the future, like, you know, we can get to that. But right now, the way I look at it, it's like, you know, even if like as an officer, you're wearing a uniform. So if something happens, like everybody's looking at you, right? So like if I'm on a traffic stop, which we don't really have a lot of officers that only do that. If I'm on a traffic stop and let's say, you know, I finish my stop, and let's say there's a like I'm in front of a school and there's a school shooting, right?
right.
If I'm the officer, but I don't have a gun now, like how am I going to go help with that? You know what I mean? And so and those are like, you know, those are scenarios that probably there's not, you know, the chances of you being on traffic stop and then seeing a school shooting are very slim. But there are times when those things might happen. Is also on a traffic stop. You know, we've seen where officers, you know, have you know, pull up to a traffic stop, and there's a lot of people that don't want to go to jail. There's a lot of people that don't like police, or they may be on there like, man, I know if I get stopped and they find all this, like I'm going to prison forever, and they're just like, forget it, right? So we have people that come out, start shooting, or have their gun ready. There's like so many guns in the country that not having one in case you need it, it's just there's no way an officer would ever work that way just because of that. You know, it's like we've seen where officers get ambushed just because they're sitting in their car. You know, you go into a call and you think it's going to be something, you know, something very simple. Like I'll be at a park with kids playing games, and if somebody tries to come up and tries to harm those kids or to harm me, then I have to be able to defend everybody around. And so, I mean, that's why a lot of people have guns. And so the I think, you know, I don't know that many people that have actually shot their guns. Like I've been a cop for 12 years. I've never shot my gun at anybody. And there's I can probably count on two of my hands out of our 2,000 officers that I know personally, maybe just one hand actually, that I know personally have shot their guns at somebody, and even fewer that have actually killed somebody, you know? And so it doesn't happen as often as it seems. Even in our city, we've had one officer involved shooting, and it's already almost July. You know what I mean? Which is you know, for the millions of calls that we take, the thousands, you know, that we do on a daily basis. You know, it's pretty low percentage. You know, like we don't want that to happen, and inevitably it will. But it's just one of those things that's like, you know, it's shooting and guns are probably the smallest percentage of things that police officers do and use. Very small percent. Everything else is really talking. So that's why we train, you know, communication, de-escalation, you know, your critical thinking, you know, implicit bias. That's why a lot of those trainings are a lot more important than shooting for us.
And I think too, what's actually interesting is like before the first time I talked to you was before I interviewed the white police officer that I was going to
Mm-hmm.
talk to. And so now I'm talking to you after I interviewed him, and your kind of situations are a bit different. Like they're obviously going to be different, but like the way you explain things and the way you discuss policing are different. Just because I guess, you know, he's coming from a whole different perspective as a white male,
Mm-hmm.
coming from a whole different perspective as a black male, and just it's very interesting just to have that conversation with.
Yeah. No, it is, you know, and I think that's an important thing to realize is that, you know, as police are like we all get lumped into the same, hey, you know, this guy did this, so now all of you guys do this. You know what I mean? It's like, dude, we're all different. Like you could talk to three other black people from my department, probably in my office, and they'll probably say totally different things than I say. You know what I mean? And but that's just the individuality of being a police officer. You know, I've never been like when I've gone into a community meeting or gone and talked to somebody, nobody's ever said, hey, you got to say this, 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 this. It's never been that way. And so that's to me, like that should actually show people that look like we don't have anything to hide. Like our training is out there, our policies are out there. You know, there's nothing really to hide about anything that we do within the police department. You know, and we all interpreted all of the things that we do a little bit different. You know, like I may come from a different you know, philosophy of more community policing and more like empathy and like trying to be, I'm like officer friendly, Whereas if, you talk to a SWAT person and he might be a little bit more tactical, talk about tactics and SWAT stuff and everything like that. And so there's just a lot of different personalities within policing, which is good because you want that type of diversity, because you can't have an entire department of just community policing officers, and you can't have an entire department of just SWAT officers or canine officers, and so, it's good to have people that are really tactically minded, like, officer safety, and I need to do this. And it's good to have some officers that, are like all about the community and trying to do their best to make sure the community's taken care of and everything like that. And then it's even better when you can put all of that in one person, and, but that's what we need to work on and train to where everybody's thinking holistically about the entire situation. But if people don't understand the why community policing is super important, then they're not going to buy in when you try to get them to go out and do stuff and go hang out with people. And so that's part of the discussion that we're having internally is, this is why I go and play soccer with kids in uniform, because I was taught something when I was a kid. And so I was afraid of uniforms when I was a kid, but I know that if I have a couple of positive encounters and have fun, now it's going to, kind of bring my guard down. And now I'm going to be able to understand, and I want to have more dialogue and ask questions and stuff like that. So yeah, but no, it is interesting that there are a lot of different viewpoints when it comes to policing. And then the same thing when you talk to people with Black Lives Matter, you got so many different viewpoints, and it's interesting.
And that's true too, because like I've been doing interviews on that side too, and I've talked to people and got answers in the Black Lives Matter community that I actually didn't even expect. Like I was talking to one guy and he said, I think we really need, Black people should really get back involved in like religion and stuff. And I was like, okay, I mean, that's one viewpoint. And then we have like other people who are completely like against, policing, and they want the whole system gone. Like,
yeah.
So I think that's a very interesting thing to discuss too. I think one of my main issues though with police officers right now at this time is that I don't feel like enough of them are speaking up, and I don't feel like enough white police officers are taking accountability for, their actions that they may have done or actions they've seen. And, I've emailed and end up having to text a lot of police officers, and a lot of them are like, I support you, but can't say anything. And people are, they have contracts on things they can't discuss. But at the same time, I do feel like you should be in a position where you can't be neutral right now. There's no such thing as being neutral.
Exactly. And I can speak to that. There's a lot of police departments that don't allow their officers to do interviews, to post things about policing, to take any type of political views. There's a lot, and even within my department, a lot of people feel like they can't do that. And so I've kind of been lucky because I started doing my community policing stuff, and then I was kind of allowed to like post, and then I was able to kind of create my own pages because I was getting a lot of, teens in high school, middle school that would ask me questions after I'd go and do like community engagement event or go talk about suicide or mental health. And then, I get people reaching out to me for that. So that's why I created my officer pages for that. So then it wasn't like tied to all my personal stuff. But there are, I would say 98% of police officers, I'd probably say 96% of police officers feel like they can't do it, or they're not allowed to, or if they say something that, it doesn't align with the department, they have to make sure and be clear, like, hey, this is my opinion. This is the police department's opinion. You know what I mean? And so I've had to make that clear with my stuff. And so that's why I've been able to do it. But I have a lot of friends that feel like they can't do stuff like this. And so that's something that I feel like needs to be changed. And I've always been a proponent of being a lot more transparent, allowing officers to talk, because when we go out into the community and we're doing stuff, traffic stop, doing a call, and somebody asks questions, it's not like, hey, I'm sorry, I can't answer them. You know what I mean? Like, we talk and we spend time. And so there needs to be a point when police departments are like, okay, hey, let's cut this chain off and let's allow people to go and be more expressive on social media or in public, about their opinions and what they feel like is going on. So I think it's just a lot of people just don't want to get in trouble right now.
Yeah, and I can understand that, especially when you have like families to support and stuff like that. But I do think we are at a time of change, and to be to be set back by fear is not. This is not the time for that.
Yeah,
Like,
but I'll add to that. I will add to that, and it was a huge thing for me to do this. There's a lot of officers that um, you know have been found. You know what I mean? Like they find family photos and all this, and then they plaster stuff publicly. If they do, even I know personal some officers that did nothing wrong, but since their name got in the paper or something happened, they were found by these groups that are here that don't like police, and then they started putting their addresses up, started putting their family schools up, and stuff like that. So there's I don't blame people for not wanting to do and I would never force somebody to do it. But if there's people that want to, they should be allowed to, and if they want to do that. But it's a huge thing that you have to have a discussion. Like I had to just have a discussion with my wife about it, because especially now, and this was even a long time ago, where it's like, hey, well, what about when something happens and now everybody's going to be at your front doorstep, or they're going to be following me to my work, or they're going to follow your kids or something like that. And those are things that people have to really consider, and especially in a time like this when there's a lot of people out there that just think that you're the worst. And so it is kind of scary, and it's scary to put yourself out there and your views and your thoughts out there.
yeah, and I agree, and I do, and that's why I like too. Whenever I like do any discussions with like, especially right now with any police officer or protester of any sort, like I really try to emphasize to like people who do watch my stuff to really be respectful. Like even when I was speaking to the white police officer, everyone was like, "I want you to nail him, like really go in at it." And I was like, "Yeah, I understand that, and I get where you're coming from, and that would be cool, but at the same time, I am building a relationship with these people,
Exactly. Yeah.
and I can't, and I don't want to come off as disrespectful. I'm not a disrespectful person, and
Yeah.
I don't do that just because that's what you want. You can go talk to them yourself and be disrespectful, but
You go do that.
yeah, but for
Yeah.
me, that's not, and I definitely do understand that, but I like I said, I think right now we're at a
Right now's the
time.
time. Yeah.
Yeah,
And I've been calling, been like, hey man, you gotta start speaking out, man. Like we need people that understand and can help like bring people together and like unite people, because that's what we need right now. Us being silent just is not gonna help. It's not gonna help at all. And so
and for me, I've been trying to work on like really recognizing different people's form of activism. I think at one point it was like if you're not really out there and you're not pushing and forward, like you're not an activist. You're not. But I think people have do activism in their own way, and
hmm
sometimes maybe like speaking out isn't necessarily their way of doing activism. So
exactly.
like learn how to try to respect that.
hmm
But in the beginning, I was like, no, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Like,
No, I
no.
feel you. I was the same way. I feel you. I'm like, man, I need more people speaking out, doing something, man. I need something. But
Yeah.
yeah, no, I feel you. I'm right with you on that. I'm right with you. But yeah, there's a lot of people that they're doing it on their own. They're, having discussions, and that's what I'm really hopeful for. And I'm actually kind of happy that this has sparked a lot of discussions and dialogue with people that you normally don't have dialogue with. And so that's a huge positive of what's going on right now. That people are talking and trying to gain that understanding.
Yeah, yeah, and that's very important for me for any platform I'm on is to create understanding. Like I said, like I'm still young and I don't want to grow up in this environment. I mean, for me, like I don't plan on living in the United States when I get older. Um, you know, I have family here and stuff like that, so it's very important for me. And then the next thing we have to work on is ICE, because like that's a whole nother beast
Yeah,
that
yeah, you're right. You're right.
yeah
Yeah, I talk
yeah
about that too when I talk. I'm like, hey, think about immigration, man. Like,
yeah. And
yeah.
it's tough for my family, a lot of people I know, just because my parents are immigrants. So
hmm
it's and a lot of my friends are immigrants. So
Yeah.
it's like something that I don't want to be in a point where like I get tired and I ignore it and then I move away and go live my life. I do think it's important for me to always have a platform, but yeah, I don't plan on staying here forever. So
I get it. But it's
um,
very commendable. I love what you're doing, and thank you for having me on too. So
Yeah.
For the second time.
For the second time. For the second time, yeah. But thank you so much for wanting to be on. You know, it's hard to get people, so thank you for being willing.
Yeah, no problem. Anytime. I don't back down.
Yeah. Yeah, of course. All right. So, any last things you want to say?
No, just just keep doing what you're doing, and anybody watching, just try to gain that understanding on both sides. Think about the way that you're talking to people when you're trying to get them to understand, and spend energy where the energy needs to be spent. That was one of my biggest problems at the beginning of this was, I was spending a lot of energy on people that I didn't really need to, and so when it was time to actually like go into action and start really trying to inflict change, like I was kind of spent because I'm like, dude, I've been talking to the wrong people for too long and trying to get them to understand, and they were the wrong people. And so just spend it where it needs to be spent, and always be pushing forward to some change, and then the world will be a better place.
Yeah, I agree. All right. Thank you so much, and have a great day. Have an
Thank you.
awesome.
You too.
And all right, I'm gonna stop recording.